There's nothing more exhilarating than pointing out the shortcomings of others, is there?
I know you said you were a Discord newbie, so let's make sure it goes. Mick? Hello?
Hey.
Hey, how's it going, man? Here, let me turn you up a
Hey.
little bit.
Yeah, no problem.
Good. Okay. So everyone, this was the very special guest we were gonna have on. He actually reached out to me initially about about the thing that's gonna happen next Saturday. Um, but then I was like, hey, do you want to come on this Saturday? We can talk a bit, and then at the end we can announce what's happening next Saturday. So yeah, Mick, if you want to introduce yourself and tell them how we got connected, and so I think a lot of people will
Yeah,
be very interested to hear.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, so I've been uh, um, I've been doing Ask Me Anythings for the subreddit for the MensLib subreddit for the last like 3 years or so. And so a lot of we have a kind of a behind the scenes Slack where the mods and some of the regulars hang out and talk shop. And we love your videos. It was just a lot of people talking about it. And I was like, that'd be a great person to have on for an AMA because like body image issues is a huge thing that we talk about, and your video on like body image and steroid use and things like that. That I think that's something important that should be talked about. And I started looking at or watching your Q&A sessions, and it's just like a lot of things that I think are really goes along with what we try to do at Men's Lib. So it's just kind of a natural fit.
Yeah, thanks, man. Well, it's funny that you reached out because, Mick is a mod here at Men's Live. Some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the subreddit. It actually got brought to my attention after the male dating video. So basically, in the video, I was discussing, um, um, healthy male spaces that you can talk about male issues. Um, Aside from there are some out there, but unfortunately a lot of them have been overrun by toxicity or just
Yep.
bad faith actor bitterness. That and it's unfortunate because a lot of guys don't get into those movements for that reason.
Hmm.
They actually want to, oh, I want to help, I want to figure it out, but then they get brought under the wing of someone who actually isn't doing it for the right reasons, or doing it for or maybe they think they are, but they're just so consumed with bitterness or anger that they
Yeah.
just can't really see straight. um and so a lot of people mention, "Hey, have you seen Men's Lib?" And I'm like, "Oh no, what's that?" It's like, "Oh, it's a Reddit subreddit." And to be honest, I kind of fell into what I spoke about in the video. My first, um, I was skeptical because it's hard. You hear like, "Hey, this is a really good space," and then you're like, "Well," especially when it comes to men's issues, like there have been I've seen so many ones that people speak highly of, and then I get there, I'm like, whoa, like this. There's a lot of, even if it's like a little tinge, it's
Hmm.
a little,
Yep.
you can tell.
Yep.
But I checked Men's Lib out, and this is what I'm talking about. Like you guys
Nice.
have done, I think, a fantastic job of creating
Yeah.
creating a space where you can talk about these issues in a healthy way, in a way that isn't, hey, here, so I know, hey, let's talk about your problems by telling you who's to blame, by telling you who you can be mad at. It's, hey, let's just get together, talk about these things, and find solutions that make things better for everyone, not at the expense of others.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And that was like kind of like the reason for even making this, because it's such a like a fraught um area to discuss, just especially online, because bad faith actors will come in and pretend to like have legitimate issues and kind of like sea lion and stuff like that, and they can just really bring the whole thing down, and it makes it almost impossible to like create a supporting environment for other people who are going through some rough stuff. And like you've mentioned a lot, um, guys have problems. It's not easy for us or for anybody, and we need a place to like be able to talk about that in a way that's not tearing down other people or being hateful, which unfortunately a lot of men's spaces are. I like to kind of think of it as like there's bad actors that like to groom angry young men, into hating certain people for their own advantage. And unfortunately, a lot of male spaces online that are supposed to provide support just turn into that. But we have a great team. It's just not just me. And I'm not sure what our mod team is up right now, probably like 30 people, and it's international. We try to do as much diversity as we can. So we have there's a couple women on the team, a couple trans men, non-binary people, people of color. So it's not perfect because nothing is, but we're actively trying to have a well-rounded mod team that can really keep eyes on the place, and we try to shut down. There's a balance between, do you want, like, someone says something cringy, but the community is kind of pushing back. Okay, maybe we'll let that go because it's kind of good to let the community kind of set people straight and bring them in. But sometimes things get out of hand. You just have to go like, whoa, we can't have this here. This is just going to turn very bad. So it's unfortunate we have to be so hands-on sometimes, but otherwise you get overrun with people who just want to recruit.
Absolutely. And it's difficult because you're dealing with, like, I've struggled with this in my own community. Even like I'm at, I think, 60K subs now. Before that, even when I was like at 10, you don't kind of realize how much you don't really have control, or rather how easily your audience or the people you're speaking to can sort of can shift in one direction.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can just, all it can be is like maybe like for example, there was one time when I posted like a meme on the community page, and this was a while back, and I thought, it was like, oh, this is a funny joke. And I remember seeing like a few comments on it, and a couple of them had likes, and I was like, and there were comments that I was like, not really good, like not really on board with, or like wasn't really the message. And I was like, okay, I have to, maybe I should keep my eye on this, and sort of, or at the very least, not really like on the individuals, but rather maybe I should take a look at my rhetoric, see if am I doing things that are sort of attracting this sort of audience, or making it seem like I'm on board with it. One of the big ones actually has nothing to do with really social issues. Was when I was doing the Game of Thrones rewrite series, we would always make fun. We would sort of hate on, Benioff and Wise D&D, the creators. And like I would have like a bunch of jokes in the videos of saying like, fuck D&D. However, what I started to realize is, like, halfway through the series, I got comments from people saying, it's like, yeah, it's funny, because like, we get it, but like, is this sort of coming more of like, is this about like sort of like writing and sort of like seeing the good and like of like sort of like the art and having fun, or is it just like having a hate boner for the writers?
Right.
And I took that to heart, because I remember like seeing some comments where they were just like, yeah, fuck D&D, fuck HBO, and I was kind of like, maybe we should turn this around. And I actually started sort of like weeding it out. Like here and there, I would make little jokes, but for the most part, I would kind of, in the second half of the series, I stayed away from it, because it just sort of, and again, if I hadn't done that, if I had just kind of let it go, like, who cares? I could have ended up with an audience full of people who just wanted to see me be very just like kind of turn to like a hate reactionary channel. Like, yeah, like fuck this TV show, fuck this. And that's not something that I wanted to do, or people I wanted to talk to. So
what's really important. Oh yeah. What's really important with creators and not just like creators, but like modders and everything, is like setting that tone for the community. Like, if you don't keep an eye on that, you can, and you're putting out that negativity out there, and encouraging it, or maybe it's not even encouraging, just letting it fester. You can quickly find your community, whether that's a subreddit or a YouTube comments or Discord, turning really bitter and just wanting to go there for the hate. And by the way, I'm not sure if you got my DM. The creator of MensLib is in your Discord. So if you want to, like, if you can three-way call him in, that'd be cool. I'm not sure if we can.
Maybe. Hang on. Let me see.
Let's see.
Awesome. So,
cool.
Matt, so yeah, so Mick reached out to me about doing the AMA for next week.
Yeah.
Again, thank you so much. I'm so excited about it. I have no idea how AMAs work. It's going to be a very trial and error sort of thing, but we'll
No,
work.
it's all right. We're well practiced at this point, coaching people through it. So
Perfect.
yeah.
So yeah, so my biggest question was, and so yeah, again, I was just so serendipitous about how people mentioned it. I found the subreddit, and then you guys reached out to me. I was like, oh, this is awesome. So yeah,
It's
my
kismet.
question, yeah, right. So how did you, or what drove you to, how did you create the subreddit, and sort of like, how did you organize it, but also what was the catalyst for making you want to do so?
Yeah, sure. So the impetus for it was this was back in I guess 2016, and I had gotten pretty much addicted to the subreddit, subreddit drama. You still had like the aftermath of Gamergate and all of the just continuing gender wars, the MRAs versus feminists sort of stuff. And it was really entertaining for a long time until I realized I was just spending all of this time sort of rubbernecking the gender wars. And it started to be a real drag, and I decided that if I was going to be involved in that space at all, I needed to be doing something to help. Simply spectating and kind of dunking on people wasn't really achieving anything. And meanwhile, you did have, there was the only people talking about men's issues were these sort of reactionary elements of like the men's rights movement, and actual men's issues were going completely unaddressed because they were so far out in right field that nobody wanted to actually talk about the underlying substantive issues. So I found a reference to the men's liberation movement from the 1970s. There was sort of a parallel to the feminist to the women's lib movement, sort of thing. But there wasn't anything like that was active as far as I could tell. So somebody had already gotten the like MensLib subreddit, the R MensLib, and I asked him if he wanted to actually do something with it, and he agreed, and made me the top moderator on the thing. And then I just started posting around to a couple of places. Hey, do you want to, actually talk about men's issues in a healthy, not reactionary way, one that is complementary with feminism, possibly uses some of the same ideas and terminology, and was just overwhelmed by the response. I mean, I really thought that we were going to have maybe, I don't know, 50 to 500 people who were interested in that. And immediately, like within 24 hours or something, I think we had 2,000 subscribers already.
Wow.
Which was overwhelming for me to try to moderate on my own. And of course, at that point, we didn't have any like rules written down or anything, but there were a couple of people, and some of them are still on the mod team today, who thought that it was a cool idea and asked to be moderators as well. And I brought them onto the team, and we started hammering out some, basic mission statement, real basic, like rudimentary rules, like, don't paint everybody with a broad brush. If you want to, if you want to criticize a particular thing, be specific about it. Don't say this thing's bad, therefore feminists are all evil, sort of stuff. And it just it started growing from there.
Awesome. Yeah. So to your first point, I would ask, so what was it like? Sort of like 1 and 2 questions. So how did you tackle when it was coming out? Because as Mick kind of alluded to, what I found, and a lot of people, so on my YouTube channel, I respond to a lot of comments. I heart a lot of comments, and a lot of people say, that's not really something a lot of creators do. That's interesting, especially with someone like your size. And part of the reason I did was because it kind of gave me some control over the direction the Irons was going in. So if someone posted something, like I made a Last of Us 2 review, and that was a very contentious game in terms of like sort of social issues with, they had a trans character, and so there were some people who commented like these really weird things about it, and now I could have just not done anything, but I was like, you know what, I kind of want to address this, so I would respond, and it kind of, other people saw me respond. I kind of elaborated my thoughts, and it kind of gave me some control over, hey, this isn't that sort of channel. We're not really, that's not really how I feel about that issue. I don't really want anyone else to feel about, like, you can, you're entitled to what you believe and you feel, but like, this might not be the place for you if you feel that way. And I realized,
Yeah, no.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think that you really do have to be proactive about that kind of thing. Speaking to a point that Mick made a little while ago, what you risk not being proactive is it's not just that like reactionaries are going to think that your space is safe for them to be reactionary in. You also end up driving away a lot of the traffic that, a lot of the members that you would like to have be part of your community.
That's a great point.
So, people, say like trans men, for instance, are definitely welcome on MensLib, but if we allowed overt transphobia on MensLib, they're not going to make a big show out of leaving. They're just all going to evaporate away.
Mm-hmm. And oh, sorry, go ahead, Mick.
There was actually a really good example of this that I saw the other day. In Reddit, you have this mod mail thing, and we get notified when people mention MensLib, and there's a another men's issues subreddit that mentioned us, and we constantly get this thing like, we're not actually a men's group. We're actually just like some secret cabal of women who are trying to force feminize the boys or something like that.
We're four feminists in a trench coat.
Yeah, exactly. It was really interesting because this person's whole argument was like, look at the top 10 posts that they've ever had at all times. And like the first one was like a Trans Day of Visibility one. There's like a Black Lives Matter one, and there was a one about biphobia, and like, these aren't really issues for men or whatever. And I was thinking like, okay, so bi men don't exist, trans men don't exist, black men don't exist. So it's like, cis het straight, like it's like okay, who are you really trying to make this other alternative men's issue subreddit for? It's like clearly not for those people. And like those issues and how they intersect with masculinity matter. And that doesn't take away from issues that intersect with masculinity that, white men have or straight men have or whatever,
Absolutely. And it's not to say that, it's not that, or which ones I think people kind of get this idea that like, oh, well, X group, and that kind of, this is sort of to go back to your point, Matt, a lot of people kind of got upset that I even spoke of the pickup artist community in my male dating video. They were upset that I spoke of it in even I went pretty hard on a lot of them and like sort of the culture at whole, but even a sliver of, hey, actually, this one thing they talk about actually is something that we can take to heart and use. There are people who were just like, no, don't even give them that, like, just don't even say that. Like, you just need to like condemn. However, the danger in doing that is that these issues, the male dating struggles that people face, no one ends up talking about because they're so worried about being wrapped up with, pickup artists or red pill idiots. But yeah, if we don't do it, then no one will. But then there's the fact of people seem to think of like, and it goes good to your point, Mick, that like, oh, because X group has it worse, then we shouldn't talk about this other group who has it better in some respects. And I don't really, I think that's poison because it kind of creates this dichotomy of we can only talk about certain issues at a time. Whereas there are certain issues that affect men as a whole. There are certain issues that affect gay men or black men or men of different races. And these all coexist with one another. They're not separate things. They're not things that we should be, that we should like form tribes about. Like we should all be working together and discussing these things sort of in the same space. And I think that will benefit not just the people who, not just the particular issues we're talking about, but just everyone. It gives them a larger view of masculinity, of what it means to be a man, of men's issues from all walks of life.
And what's funny about that is, and we joke about this among the mod team a lot, because we get, we'll get a mod mail that's like, why are you talking about this issue instead of this issue? It's like Reddit's not rate limited. Like, if you want a post that's about the issue that you want to talk about, go ahead and make a post. That's fine. We can talk about. I mean, Reddit will take as many posts as you want to give it at a time. In fact, we, sometimes the sub is kind of slow, and it'd be great if somebody wanted to do a write-up on their particular pet issue. All of these things can coexist on the front page at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's so to go back, well, first, to continue on that, just to go back to sort of like, commenting and like being proactive, like you said, sort of like what Mick, how you sort of like alluded to, what I found was after I started doing that, after I started commenting, once I got up to about, 20, 30,000 subs, what I saw happening, and I was like really proud of this, not just for me, but like the people in my community and my mods and my friends I've made, is that someone would post something that I would like, that would be kind of like, I'm like, that's not really what we're doing here. And I would go to comment, and I would see that people in the community already did. And there were like people trying to explain to him, like, hey, actually, that's not really what we're talking about. And that's like what we're talking. That's like what a community is. It's not just like you guys, the mods, just doing it all yourself. It's that you foster a community of people who are all on the same page, and they want to support that, and they also put in the work, and they reach out to people. Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mick.
Oh yeah. There's something like actually like tremendously validating about that too, because like I'm sure you all do this too, where you like kind of doom scroll like Twitter comments and stuff like that, and you see something that like really hits you hard, and you're like, God damn it, like that is so unfair, and that like what they're saying there, kind of like hits to your core, and you click on the comments, and people are pushing back. Like as someone who like doom scrolls a lot, those comments are like, oh my God, that's lifeblood right there. So it's like just building that community that can like push back on those people, and like don't be a dick about it, but like try to bring them in, train, whatnot. But even if you have those comments and they do hurt people in your community, it is so awesome to have a community to kind of push back against that and all that.
And it reminds me of early days on MensLib. I think we did have a lot of like early adopters, but they were people who mostly wanted to see that good content out in the world, not necessarily be, like providing it or really engaging to the point where they're creating the content. And so the mod team did do a lot, sort of like pushing material. It was the onus was kind of on us to go out and find like a good article about like men's dating struggles or whatever. But as we've fostered that community, and as the community has grown, that's less and less a thing that we have to do, because we have what do we have, like 180,000 subscribers or something like
175.
That. 175. At this point we have like a really solid like core of people who not only want to see that conversation but want to contribute to it. So we're not having to do quite as much work to go out and find the good stuff. People are bringing that to the community.
Yeah, it almost acts as like a sort of like a feedback loop. But the danger in that, and this sort of goes towards like you guys are saying about the, not necessarily the responsibility that you were like a content creator or like a moderator has, but more of a kind of going back to the discussion we just had about like, if you are fighting for this cause, it's people expect you to to actually fight for it, to actually stand up when you need to. One of the things I've realized about a lot of red pill circles and like a lot of more toxic men's group is that it's not that they were, and this is like the big misconception, it's not that men are attracted to those groups because of the toxicity. They just want help. They're searching for, like in some cases, of course, they usually are doing so just because they need help and there's no other resource around. However, sometimes and they kind of get sucked up in the toxicity. However, sometimes the reason that community grew toxic wasn't really because of the person in charge, the person, you know, who was the YouTuber, the speaker, the leader, whatever, wasn't really because they were pushing like just straight up toxicity. That is the case in a lot of cases, but sometimes it's just because they didn't do the opposite. They didn't actually stamp out issues when they were coming up. If someone kind of joined the group, or if, you know, they started to see that like, hey, maybe the audience is going in a direction we don't like, and they didn't take action, now the feedback loop begins, but in the opposite direction. Now more
Right.
people see it and are like, hey, you know, like there are even some red pill channels that I watch, and most of them are shit. Like most of them are crap, and they're very, you know, to your point, they're very heteronormative, and there are a lot of, you know, they never really talk about. I kind of realized that too about going through a lot of videos. They never actually talk about like how do like gay or bi men fit into this in terms of like masculinity and sex, but like that's a whole other rabbit hole that they probably aren't equipped to deal with.
Oh yeah.
But what's so funny is that I see a lot the red pill guys. Some of their videos, I mean, there is trash in them, but sometimes they're not like super vitriolic. They're kind of like even keel, middle of the road. And then you read the comments, and they're just vitriol. They're just like women are whores, like, you know, and it's just like, where did this disconnect happen? And it was, I think, that at some point you started to get a fan base that was, you know, that wasn't really meshing with you, that was sort of more vitriolic. But because you didn't really step in and take note, that vibe sort of fostered in your community. And now,
And
despite what you're fighting for, you're basically speaking to a lot of people who may not even be on the same page as you. And I, as a creator, that would just be hell for me, and I'm sure you guys as well.
yeah, well, and to add to your point, and I'm sure this happens with other like interest community groups, but in the men's issues sphere, you really do. There's this hard nugget of extremely online, extremely educated people who will move into any space that they think is now open to them and basically run the discussion. And I'm thinking of, I'm not talking about in general. I'm thinking of specific individuals that we've dealt with, you know, since MensLib started. People who I don't like. This one guy is, I swear to God, he's online 18 hours a day. And all he does is talk down on MensLib. Any opportunity that he has, he will talk MensLib down, and you know, he blows up minor disagreements into we've basically, you know, violated the Nuremberg tribunal, you know. And so, you know, if you aren't, yeah, if you're not being proactive, if you're not being careful about that, there are some people out there who, I mean, you could call them trolls. I think they're true believers. I don't think this is like they're just doing it for the lulz. I think I mean, this one person I'm thinking of genuinely thinks that we're evil, and you know, if we let those incredibly dedicated people in the door, and then we don't, you know, enforce the rules that we have for good behavior in the community, yeah, they end up they drain off all of the people, like you said, you know, even in red pill circles, you know, you've got guys who are like, I don't understand why, you know, red pill is considered to be like a misogynistic ideology. I'm just here for dating advice. But then you go into any red pill thread, and the conversation is being dominated by these people who, you know, really do believe that all women are whores, and that, you know, that they have the brain of a child and stuff like that. You know, like overtly misogynistic stuff. But does that really account for, you know, why most people are there? Probably not. And you have to offer some kind of an alternative, because if that's the only voice out, if that's the only resource out there, then where else are they supposed to go?
Absolutely. And you know, it's funny because a lot of people, I had a couple comments kind of like I tend to do that when I'm writing a script. I'll like use a certain word like over and over and over. Like I'm not a very good editor, in terms of like my scripts. But one of the terms that like I throw out a lot and like is and that is heard in general in terms of like red pill paces is toxic. And when you hear that, sort of think, oh, it just means it's bad. It's like, well, no, it's not necessarily just that it's bad. When you think of toxic, like it's poison. It's the fact that it's not necessarily that it's just like, oh, there are bad people there. It's that sometimes there are guys who just get, like you mentioned, a lot of these guys aren't just trolls. Sometimes they are true believers who got caught up in this ideology because when they were searching for a place to help them with their issues, there was no MensLib. There was no whatever. They got sucked in by some maybe grifter or just some very, very bitter people, and it literally infected them. And then they go into these spaces, and you have these young, impressionable guys who don't really know. They're struggling. They're angry. They're frustrated. And before someone like you can get to them and be like, hey man, there's a different way. This isn't the answer. Just being angry and finding someone to blame isn't going to help you. These guys get in there, and it's like, oh hey, you're struggling with dating. It's like hypergamy, feminism, like, and XXXX. It's the exact same story.
Well, and misery loves company, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you build your entire worldview around being miserable, us versus them, zero sum, antagonism, then you want to bring more people. You believe you've taken the red pill. You're seeing the world the way it really is, man. And you want to bring more people into that with you. But yeah, it ends up being this sort of virulent, hateful thing, because you do have the true believers who are trying to convert more people to their particular brand of misery.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really tailor-made for how a lot of men, and I would guess a lot of Western men are raised. Like we're not really allowed to show vulnerability and open up and have those close emotional relationships with our other male friends or people in general. We're taught to kind of anger is kind of your only valid emotion. So and I remember, and I'm sure a lot of you out there too, maybe getting out of high school or getting out of college and just feeling like all alone and having no one there. Like all of your social support has just like vanished, and you're like on your own. And you're like, oh shit, like I feel so alone and isolated right now. And like, yeah, you try to find people online, and it is so easy to, like, oh, okay, let's find some other dudes, and you can wind up in those places. They're like tailor made for the depressed young man.
And not to get on my ordinary political soapbox, but just the fact that our society, living under like capitalism is so alienating anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That if you can find any community that validates the sorts of feelings that you're having, then they can kind of Trojan horse you into ideology from there. That's one of the reasons that places like the Red Pill or some of the I don't know, a Voice for Men, like some of the worst men's rights movement sort of spaces are so insidious, is because they start from a position of, well, and you see it with white supremacy too, right? They start from a position of validating somebody's feelings and then take you to, oh, by the way, here's who you have to blame for that.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because I'm so glad you brought that up, because people think when people are saying like I've discussed a lot of like red pillars, in the video and like we've done in Discord, and some people will say stuff like, well, actually this particular guy isn't as worse as like some of the other guys. It's like, well, A, that doesn't really mean anything. They can still be bad, but B, I actually think those people are far more dangerous. Like there are some people on like YouTube that are just straight up vitriolic, where they're like, fuck women, fuck gays, whatever. And there are people who are drawn to that, But for most part, most reasonable people will say like, I don't like that. That's too much for me. Even if they're in a bad place, they'll stay away. It's the ones, it's the channels, it's the gurus, the movements that, like you said, start off small. Hey man, like we're about positivity here. We're about not being bitter. And then slowly, whether they're doing it on purposely or not, I think a lot of them are for, because they're very astute in what they're doing, they'll just like drop in little things here. They'll like drop a little article about, feminism being evil, or like something, mention a stat about like, 80, one of my favorites on Red Pill is like 80% of women initiate divorces. And it's like, I'm like, okay, that's just a fact, but like, what's the larger narrative you're building here? You're trying to, you say you're just like stating facts and you're just trying to help guys who are like divorced, but what's the larger narrative? Like, you're giving all these little pieces. If you step back and look at the larger picture, what is it building? And what's scary about this and what's so dangerous is that you can get very reasonable guys who are not hateful, not bitter, and they see these places and they're like, oh, okay, there's some, there are some bad things, but like overall it seems positive. But then they start to absorb little things that maybe are like, you're kind of like, and then slowly and slowly and slowly. And the reason I was so glad you mentioned it, when you compare that to like hate groups like white supremacy or something, people don't just wake up and become like, yes, I'm gonna like join the this happens over years and years and years of very slow indoctrination without even realizing. And that's what's so dangerous, is that you can't even stop yourself, because like I was lucky enough to I hit like a brick wall during my pickup artist days, and that kind of knocked me out. I kind of saw the path I was going down, and I was like, oh shit, I have to change course. But for a lot of guys, it just happens it's like death by 1,000 cuts. It happens so subtly. And like you take that person from like 5 years ago until now, and that they can be like completely different sides of the aisle. And but because it happens so slowly, so methodically, you didn't even notice it. And that, I think, is why these like these less vitriolic channels, like the stepping stone sort of channels or groups, I think in many ways those are far more dangerous.
It's like the Jordan Peterson to like ultra trad chauvinist pipeline, right? I mean, like he's just a lifestyle guru. He's just giving you good advice. Make sure that you clean your room and like take care of your physical health. Also, women are the dragon of chaos. You can ignore that part if you want, but make sure that you're cleaning your room. And then this is tangential, I guess, but it's not like social media algorithms are helping with this at all, because we know that YouTube wants to feed you progressively more like out there or like intense sort of content. If you watched Jordan Peterson video, then maybe it turns you onto some like light pickup artistry, which then turns you onto red pill stuff, which then leads you down the primrose path toward just full-blown misogyny and outright like reactionary sentiment, and that's incredibly hard to combat. If you can't bring if we're not doing the same thing except in the opposite direction, validating, it's like it can be really isolating to be lonely, be a lonely young man. Here are some things that you can do to work on that. You have to validate the feelings up front, and not chase them out of that space, which I think a lot of people do end up getting. I mean, Reddit's a great example of this, that for all of the good that they do, some of the like women focused feminist subreddits can be kind of knee jerky if a man comes into their space to talk about, what about how this issue, affects men? Can we talk about, say, domestic violence or something like that? And people can be run off from these places, and then that's their takeaway. That's it's either you go to the men's rights subreddit where they tell you, yes, you're right, or you go to the feminist subreddits that say, we do support, men's issues, but this is a women-centered space, which isn't terribly welcoming if you're, an isolated young man looking for answers.
Mm-hmm. And especially like I mean before, it's like if we have like a young, and I kind of go into this in the video in terms of like responsibility is like, as as men who are like, we have that camaraderie. If a guy is like sort of like on his way to like inceldom, where he's very bitter and very angry at women, I think it's unreasonable to expect a woman to have to sort of like come in and be like, hey, you need to be empathize with this person, even though they're like saying a lot of like really vitriolic shit about you as a woman. And so I think, I mentioned in the video, I think it's the responsibility of men who sort of, like myself, who has been down that path, and I've made mistakes. I sort of have the responsibility to kind of be the one to like reach out and say like, hey man, like this isn't the way, this isn't good. I understand you. I understand why you feel this way, but we can't condone it. And we have to find a better way. This is not the answer. But yeah, it's trying to find that middle ground. And so many guys get caught in the middle. Sometimes guys don't even want to be in either. They're like, there's no option, and they see the MRA things and like the red pill stuff, and they're like, this is too vitriolic for me. And they stay away from it. But then they never fix the issue. They never find a resource. They search and they can't find anything. And then they're so weighed down by loneliness or depression or anxiety, whatever. Eventually they just get so desperate. They're like, you know what? Okay, screw it. I can't live like this. I'm going to go to these guys because at least they're giving me something. Even if it is going to down the line and sort of infect me with this like ridiculous rhetoric, it's at least on the surface, it's giving me something. It's going to help me a little bit.
You crawl through long enough, eventually you're going to be thirsty enough that you start drinking sand.
Precisely. That's it. I think, we probably have to wrap up, but so kind of go back to the beginning. So Mick reached out to me. So I will be doing an AMA on MensLib next Saturday. Again, we'll figure it out. I am such a Reddit noob in terms of an AMA noob and stuff. I've heard of them, but I've never done one, so it should be a lot of fun. But
you'll do good.
Yeah, I'll work with you guys and we'll figure it out. So if you guys are around next Saturday, once we kind of bang out the details, I'll announce it on the channel. And I think that'll be fantastic. And then if Mick and Matt, I know we're running a little bit long, but if you guys wanted to give closing thoughts on our talk before we head out.
Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, geez. Okay. No, what more is there to say? I think I think it's really important. I'm grateful to you for the opportunity for us to come on and kind of pitch MensLib and talk about some of these issues, because I know for sure that we're not alone, because again, like our growth at MensLib was explosive from the beginning, and it's just continued. So obviously there's a need and a desire for this kind of conversation. So I guess I would say, please come over if you're interested in these topics. Please do come over and join us on MensLib. We'll be happy to have you, even if you don't want to wade directly into like hardcore gender issues or gender abolitionism or any, we talk about that stuff. We also talk about kind of lighthearted things, and sometimes it's just like good articles about how dudes rock. We've got our weekly Free Talk Friday thread. You can drop in and say hi and say what we've been up to this week. It's a really cool community, and we're always happy for more like-minded people who are looking for this kind of conversation. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you guys. And to your point, something I've realized too is that in a lot of these cases with these young men, it really isn't about, sometimes they fall into these movements that they don't actually believe what they're saying. They're so desperate for a community, just to have someone acknowledge them, even if it's just like, hey, what's up? How's it going? How's your day? That is some men are so deprived of that whoever does that, they'll just tell me what you want me to believe and I'll do it. And they get sucked into it and they're down the rabbit hole. So if you could be that person who reaches out to someone and says, hey, what's up, man? Just reaching out. How you doing? that can make. It seems small, but it can be really make a difference in a young man's life. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on. I truly appreciate it. Again, we'll be doing this next Saturday. I'll announce the details on the channel once we get it. But gentlemen, thank you so much for giving me this operatunity. You flattered me so much.
Oh yeah, no, thank you.
can-
We can't wait to have you on the sub.
I can't either. Next Saturday is going to be awesome. But guys,
Cool.
thank you so much, and thank you.
Yeah, take
Thank
care.
you. Take care.